Hello guys, welcome to another episode of the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. My name is Michael, and today we're going to talk about UFC Denver, the 25th year anniversary of the UFC, and today we're going to talk about two fights, the main event and the co-main event, Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez, and Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Mike Perry. So let's talk about the main event first. Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez. Both of those guys are coming off of a layoff. Yair had some contract issues with the UFC, and Korean Zombie had to serve mandatory time in the military, and then he injured his knee. So it was interesting to see them come back from their time off, because it was kind of hard to predict how they will look compared to their last fight, and also because it was a short notice fight since Yair stepped in when Frankie Edgar got hurt. What I thought before the fight was this: when you fight a dynamic kicker, pressuring him will always be a good idea. You make them move backwards and you take away their kicks. Also, Yair's counters are not that good, so it adds another layer to the pressure and how you can use it in your advantage. And the opposite is true for Korean Zombie. The counters are his thing, and he also counters in combinations, so that adds another layer to his pressure. You could see from the very start of the fight Yair feinting and throwing kicks. Actually, the first leg kick that he landed buckled Korean Zombie's leg. So if Korean Zombie needs a reason to pressure, Yair just gave him one in the very beginning of the fight. And I also thought that Yair could use more of those leg kicks since they were very effective. And here is where Korean Zombie played a dangerous game. He likes to counter, but with Yair you need to take away his kicks. He was still able to counter and blitz forward with combinations, but the approach he was taking, at least very early on, lacked consistency. And that's what you need when you want to pressure effectively. Korean Zombie was still having success, and if he felt like that's what he wanted to do, then fine. But by being in the middle of the cage, you give options to Yair, and that's not what you want. At that time, Korean Zombie was kind of waiting, which is fine. You can do that if you want to counter, but you're banking on your opponent finally throwing, because if he decides to just wait as well, it's going to be a staring contest. So that's what I thought about the first couple of exchanges of the fight. Korean Zombie's pressure and his footwork is more plotting, so Yair's team picked up on that, and the leg kicks were a good weapon to use against that. One thing that I noticed during the fight was when Korean Zombie was moving in fast enough with his combinations, he kind of caught Yair by surprise a couple of times and made him cover up instead of move. So I found that being an interesting way of closing the distance and limiting your opponent's movement. On the other hand, it seemed like Yair was well prepared for the pressure. He was kicking the legs, both with leg kicks and low line side kicks, and when Korean Zombie tried to kick Yair's legs to cut him off as he was pressuring, Yair countered that a couple of times with left hooks. At the beginning of the second round, Korean Zombie had more success pressuring and playing with rhythm. He would wait a split second between his strikes to let Yair throw a counter, and then he came back with a strike of his own. The grappling, or should I say clinch exchanges, were interesting, because both guys have very nice balance. There were a lot of times they tried tripping and tossing each other, but neither were successful. By the end of the second round, Zombie seemed to just take more of a "I'm going to move forward, and I know you will hit me, so I will hit you back" kind of approach. And I gotta say that he was landing harder shots, and it was working, and he was landing harder shots. And his durability, as always, was on point, so I was thinking that this strategy might actually work. Judging by the corner advice after the second round from Yair's corner, saying him they are proud of him and saying him that he needs to find motivation, I thought that Yair is a confidence fighter, meaning that when things go his way, things really go his way. But when there's resistance and an uphill battle, that's where the psychological struggles begin. It's kind of a curse of really dynamic, really athletic fighters. Third round starts and Zombie is moving forward with more urgency. That's what I thought might happen after he had more success just going after Yair and being in his face. It also means that you will get hit more, but I'm assuming that's the chance you gotta take. Throughout the third round, what helped Yair with the pressure were his kicks. He was kicking the body with both roundhouse kicks and front kicks. Zombie was still moving forward and landing big shots, so that fight was kind of a tale of two fights really. When Yair kicks, he keeps Zombie away from him and knows that when he's going to attack, he can land his shots. But when Zombie just moves forward and blitzes with combinations, he's landing his shots. And at that moment, there was no way of telling who will be more successful, either finishing the fight or just on the scorecards. The numbers were interesting though. Korean Zombie outlanded Yair 85 to 45 on significant strikes, somewhere in the middle of the third round. And again, the corner advice from Yair's team revolved around mindset, not technique, and I actually have nothing against that. I think that's great. It's just an observation and a peek into Yair's mindset. He needs to feel confident. The fourth round rolls around and Zombie's approach seems to be this. He was either waiting in the middle of the cage to counter, or he was moving forward and punching at the same time. And I gotta tell you that the latter was more successful. And I know that this fight was in Denver at high elevation, so that might have been the reason why Zombie was not able to do that often. The most significant punch of the fourth round, the one that hurt Yair, was a tricky one. It started from the Zombie doubling up on his right hand. He did it earlier in the fight, but started doing it more in the fourth round and caught Yair with the second right hand in a row as Yair was turning, so the fact that he wasn't in a good position could have contributed to the knockdown. Either way, Zombie was landing good shots, and even though he was wearing more damage, he was landing more strikes. So I thought that has to be worth more in the eyes of the judges, but you never know. Zombie had an effective way of closing the distance, as I mentioned earlier. Yair is still an improving fighter and his footwork still needs work, so what Zombie was doing was simple but effective. He was attacking pretty much in straight lines, but he was punching in combinations, and the second or the third punch was the one that was landing. He was also playing with the rhythm, which I thought would be difficult since Yair is such a dynamic fighter, but it was actually effective. He was changing the rhythm using his jab, and then he was doubling up on his right hand and attacking twice in a row from the same side, which is also tricky because you expect the second punch to come from the opposite side of the first punch, because that's how it usually goes. It's left, right, left, right, left, right. Korean Zombie, even though looked like it was a bloody fight on both ends, in my eyes he was winning the fight. In the fifth round, both guys had success. Yair kicked the body very well, and Korean Zombie was mostly throwing counters and landing really good shots. And that's kind of his game. He likes to counter, and against a developing fighter like Yair, it was effective. Still challenging and not without getting punched, but that's what it seemed was going to win him the fight. Well, just as I thought that, in the last second of the last round, in the last exchange, Yair Rodriguez pulls off the baddest, probably most flashy counter reverse up elbow ever and knocks Korean Zombie out. There's not a lot of breakdown to this. It was 100% feel. It was very intuitive. There was no setup to it. It was just feel, and holy shit, somehow it worked. It was a move from a fucking video game. It shouldn't supposed to work in real life, but it did. So congratulations to him. During the fight, in the early stages, Yair was dealing with pressure quite okay. Later on, Korean Zombie was taking over and countering well, so I thought that he was on his way to win, but Yair Rodriguez pulled it off. It was a crazy knockout, probably one in a lifetime, and I doubt that we will see that again, so enjoy it, guys. That's all for this fight. I covered the most that I could from before the knockout, so let's move on to our next fight. Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Mike Perry. Cerrone stylistically is an outside fighter. He likes to have a lot of space so that he can throw his combinations and set up his kicks. Although he's not training at Jackson Lincoln Jones Academy anymore, I'm not sure if he's still working with Brendan Gibson, because that's when his combinations and his boxing in general were at his best. The way you fight Cerrone is by pressuring him. That's what you gotta do, because Cerrone seems to be allergic to pressure. It's kind of his kryptonite. And when you think about him not dealing well with pressure, fights with Dos Anjos, an actual pressure fighter, and Darren Till come into mind. And Mike Perry is actually a pressure fighter as well. He's more tentative than your average pressure fighter, but he likes to move forward. So the question in this fight was, can Perry pressure Cowboy effectively? And if not, then Cowboy will probably kick his legs, he will kick his body, and try to kick him in the head as well. Besides working his combinations, which improved since he started working with Brendan Gibson. So either Mike Perry would pressure effectively, or Cowboy will deal with this pressure in his usual way that he developed over the years. And you could see from the very beginning of the fight Mike Perry moving forward, kicking the legs, trying to pressure, which is good. Then he threw his first right hand, which Cowboy ducked under and clinched Perry immediately, which was a very nice tactic for dealing with pressure. Because when your opponent is moving forward onto you, you know that there will be a moment when he attacks. So instead of giving him all the space and letting him cover all the ground, you can close the distance yourself. And that's what kind of Cowboy did here. It was after an attack. It was after Perry threw the right hand, and a perfect way of executing it would be before the pressure fighter attacks. But still, that worked for Cowboy, and he actually ended up in a good position. In the clinch, not against the cage yet, but with one underhook on one arm and bicep/arm/tricep control on the other arm. From there, Perry was doing a good thing by attacking the body, which over the years seems like a weak spot of Cerrone. What Cerrone used to battle the pressure were leg kicks and jabs, along with occasional level change/takedown attempt. The second time they were in the clinch, Cowboy did the same thing. He got the underhook on one side and the arm control on the other, which leaves a lot of space for knees. He was successful landing a couple of them. The third time Cowboy tried taking Perry down, they ended up in the clinch. This time Perry had both underhooks, and he managed to trip Cerrone to the ground and earn himself the first takedown of the fight. He ended up in side control too, so that's good for him. But Cowboy is quite crafty on the ground, so he managed to reverse the position and ended up on top in side control himself. While Perry tried getting up, he gave up his back for just a second, and Cerrone jumped on it. He tried taking the back, but ended up just having one hook and trapping Perry's arm. They scrambled when Cerrone was looking for the full back take, and then he was transitioning to the armbar, and eventually he ended up on the bottom where he was looking for submissions. He had a triangle attempt that Perry stuffed before Cerrone attempted an armbar, and this time he was successful. Perry tried defending by stepping over, but man, it was too tight, too deep, and too late. Mike Perry taps, and Cowboy Cerrone wins by submission. During the fight on the feet, it looked like Cowboy had control over the space of the octagon, using jabs and leg kicks to stamp the pressure. Level changes/takedown attempts were also used as a way of countering the pressure, and on the ground, Cowboy was just a better grappler. He reversed the position to be on top, and when being on the bottom, he was very active from his guard until he got a submission. Cowboy looked good and did basically what he wanted. He didn't get on the ground on his own terms, but he changed the position and took advantage of what Perry was giving him. That was a pretty solid performance from Cerrone. And of course the wholesome moment after the fight with his baby and his grandma, that was very nice to see. I'm happy for him. Congrats to him on winning the fight. Cowboy looked really good. It was the 17th time he won by submission, so people think that he's a kickboxer, but man, he's tricky on the ground as well. So congrats to him. He looked good. And that will be all for the podcast. I did enjoy talking about it, so if you guys enjoyed listening, please consider to subscribe, because I am going to continue doing this. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.